Today, my interview is with Julie Godin. She is the co-chair of the board, executive vice president of strategic planning and corporate development at CGI, which is among the largest IT and business consulting services firms in the world with over 90,000 team members. So it's a huge company. And as part of her role, Julie is responsible for making sure that all three types of the company's stakeholders are served and represented. She's also leading the company's strategic planning, marketing, communications, and mergers and acquisitions functions. So needless to say, Julie is quite busy. She's got a lot of different things that she's focusing on over there. If you are a subscriber to the show, which I hope you are or will consider to be on Apple Podcasts, you'll also get access to a bonus episode where Julie talks about how to create a culture of ownership and how to be an owner yourself, the importance of emotional intelligence, and how to get out of your own way so that you can become successful. You can subscribe on Apple Podcasts to get access to this episode, as well as weekly bonus episodes. You can also get ad-free listening and early access to new content. I hope you decide to subscribe. And now let's get into this episode. Well, probably the natural place to start would be to get a little bit of background information about you and about the company in case people are not familiar with it. So what do you do there and what does the company do?
So let's start maybe with what the company do. Basically, we are a global world-class end-to-end IT and business consulting services company. We use the power of technology to help our clients accelerate their holistic digital transformation. We have thousands of clients, more precisely 5,500 in 40 countries, 400 different offices. Like I said earlier, we have 90,000 employees, which we call members. And the reason we call them members is because they can be owner of the company through our share purchase fund. So for every dollar they invest, we invest $1 for them. And it gives them the right, being an owner, it gives them the right to transparency, visibility, communication, and take part of the life of CGI.
Okay.
And we also serve our clients through 10 different industries and 26 sub sectors. Maybe
Wow.
I can give you a couple of examples of what we do more concretely, or you
Sure.
want to.
Yeah, no, that would be great.
So, for example, in retail, we help our clients to automate supply chains processes from order to delivery. In transportation, for example, we do help them with their reserve research system, for example, in a rail company. For the space industry, since the 1970s, we've helped our clients with more than 1,000 satellite missions. We delivered mission-critical space systems around the globe. We support major navigation, communication, and Earth observation program. We share innovative uses of space technology and data with clients to solve key business challenges. And for example, the satellite images and data we produce are used to establish weather forecasts, which is consulted by more than 3 billion people. We're also working with the satellite data for the European Space Agency to help better map and monitor the impact of wildfires,
A lot
and
of
so
fun
on.
stuff.
Yes, and on financial sectors, we help our clients transfer more than 21 trillion US $21 trillion US in financial transactions every day, including real-time payments through our IP solutions, and so on and so forth.
Wow. So let's talk a little bit about how you got to the executive role. So you are co-chair of the board, executive vice president of strategic planning and corporate development, one of the top executives at the company. What was your path like to get to that role? So maybe you could start
Yeah.
way back and kind of go over
Yeah.
what your career path and trajectory was like. And was it a typical career path and trajectory or
It
okay?
was not a typical path at all. I actually studied in kinesiology, which is actually a bachelor degree, where you apply exercise and movement science to promote health and well-being. It prevents, manage, and rehabilitate injuries and restore functions and so on, and optimize human performance in the workplace. It can be also in clinical settings, in sports, or in fitness. So that was really my passion. And when you compare to what I do today, I believe that the strong common denominator is really helping people.
Yeah.
So after my kinesiology, my bachelor degree, I started to work in what was more common in gyms. Even though I really enjoy the interactions with people and so on, I didn't see myself really growing into that path. So I started to I co-founded my company, which was Oxygen Corporate Health, was promoting health and well-being within the workplace. So we sell our services, IP, and so on. So I did that for 5 years.
Okay.
And I believe it's the third year when Serge, my father, who's the founder of CGI, started the conversation with me if I would be interested to work with him in the family business and be part of the succession. So that was about the third year. It took me 2 years to decide, not to convince me, but really because I had my team back then. I wanted to make sure that I do a right transition and so on, make sure that I take the right decision as well. So 2 years after, Oxygen, my team, transferred to CGI, and they are today, since then, the global health and well-being program with the entire CGI
Wow.
globally. So this is where I started, when I started, sorry. And my first responsibility when I started at CGI was really in HR. We are we are people-centered business. So we thought it was super relevant for me to start in HR to really understand the people, the company, and so on. And we started to add after that incrementally. There are some strategies that people use is you do a role for a year or 2 or 3 years, and then you jump in another role and so on. But our strategy, and when we talked to the board as well, and we discussed among ourselves, we thought that a strategy to add responsibilities along the way was probably the best one for us. So we started in HR. And then I was given board responsibilities, IT, security, marketing and communication, eventually mergers and acquisitions.
Added more and more on top of that, huh?
More and more and more to see how I was doing and make sure that I was surrounding myself with the best people. And this is how it started. Yeah. And now I do have also in the latest one we added is a global business and strategic IT consulting as a function, as responsibility globally as well.
So what was that process like? I would imagine it's probably quite intimidating, right? You have your dad who started this company that now has 90,000 employees. You're doing something totally unrelated, well, not directly related to IT and consulting and all that sort of stuff. And you're brought in as an executive at this organization. Did you feel like you were maybe a little bit underwater, that you had to get up to speed on things? I mean, how did that feel when you were first brought into that role, like on day one?
Yeah, that's a good question. So yes, it was a bit overwhelming at the beginning. So you learn how to take your ego and put it on the side and really ask questions and try to learn as much as possible. Ask questions, try to understand. I often say to people that I started to be good at listening when I started that job here, being in HR.
How many years
So
ago was that, by the way, when you started
I
here?
was in 2009. Yeah, 2009.
Wow.
2009.
Okay.
Yeah. So basically was trying to understand and also be comfortable with the unknown and be able to say, I don't understand this. So let me go and try to find out the answer, have the conversation, ask the
Yeah.
question, so on. And to accept as well that to be vulnerable is not as big of a deal.
Yeah. Well, as you know, I'm working on a book on leadership and vulnerability, and so many people are scared of that idea of being vulnerable because they don't want to be perceived as being weak or incompetent or anything like that. Was that a fear for you ever? Being vulnerable and how people might perceive you?
Yeah, I think of course it was a bit like that at the beginning. I was putting a lot of pressure on myself, as you can imagine.
Yeah.
So I remember at that time the CEO was Mike Roach, and I went to see him. And by the way, I was not really speaking English really well. Communication was really hard at the beginning. So I had a conversation with him and said, you know what, give me 3 months, and after 3 months I'll be on top of everything, and we can add some responsibilities. a bit bold. So was working really hard, a lot of long hours and so on, putting a lot of pressure on myself. And after 3 months, I went back to him and said, you know what? Give me another 3 months. And after that 3 months, I went to him and said, okay, now I understand. Um, it's not something that it will be perfect. I will have to be a constant learner. It's a journey, not a destination. And after that 6 months, it went much more better.
Mm. Yeah, I would imagine. I would hope. So I suppose there's something to be said there about taking on roles and jobs that make you uncomfortable, because I think
Yep.
that one of the things a lot of people try to do, whether they're executives or entry or even mid-level employees, is they tend to stick within their comfort zone. Things that
Yep.
they know that they can do well at, because things that go beyond that are, I don't know, scary and uncomfortable. There's a greater chance of risk and failure. But at the same time, if you don't do those things, you don't get the reward. So for
Yep.
you, how did you think about that challenge, the getting out of your comfort zone, the doing something scary and new that you didn't know how to do? How did you approach that?
Yeah. So when I told you it took me 2 years to take a decision, I wanted to do it, but at the same time, to your point, I was a bit nervous and scared because there was a lot of things I didn't know. And English was one of them as well. IT, obviously, but English as well. And I'm a big fan of music. And at one time, well, I'm going to have to say my age here because when we used to look at CD players and you had a little like pamphlet and you have the word, the lyrics and so on, I was listening to one of the DJ and she wrote a quote and it said, between the fear of jumping into the unknown and the pain of regretting not to, I choose to be afraid. And that really talked to me. And I
Mm.
said to myself, you know what? I'm going to jump or I might regret it not to. So I did it. And since then, this is kind of my motto.
That's funny. Wait, so you got that inspiration from a pamphlet inside of a CD case?
Yep, from a DJ,
Do you remember who the
Mistress.
DJ was?
Yes, Mistress Barbara. Yeah,
Oh, yeah, yeah. She's
yeah,
I think she plays a lot of house music.
yep. So
Oh.
that was it's still one of my favorite quote actually. Yeah.
Can you imagine if you never opened that CD?
Can you imagine? Nope.
You should get in touch with her and let her know.
I actually follow her on Instagram. Maybe I should say something about this.
You
Yeah.
should. You
You're
should
right.
say, guess
Yeah.
what? Because of you, I'm now helping lead a 90,000 person company. You should have her perform at your next company company retreat.
Oh, we're gonna celebrate our 50-year anniversary in 2026, I believe.
Oh
Yeah.
wow, okay, yeah. I hope to see
Yeah.
Mistress Barbara there. Um, so I love that story, and I think there's also something to be said about not to get like weirdly philosophical or anything, but kind of paying attention to the signs that are going on around you. I think a lot of people just go through life with their heads down and they don't pay attention to things that might be coming their way, to different signs, to feedback, to things of that nature. And they get very stuck in a fixed mindset of, I can't, I can't, I can't, I'm not good enough, I'm too scared, I'm never going to be able to do it. And they don't pay attention to just the feedback that they're getting, whether it's an inspirational quote in a CD, whether it's somebody on their team saying, you can do it, I believe in you, you can do a good job. So how important is looking, and by the way, the signs can also be negative, right? I mean, if you're constantly getting negative feedback that you're struggling, that you're not ready, that's a sign that maybe you shouldn't be moving on and you need more time to learn and develop. But I think those pieces of feedback and those signs are very important, and they can lead you into some pretty cool places.
Yeah. Definitely. And it's how you take the risk as well. And to get out of your comfort zone, it's not easy. Uh, but I believe that when you accept that you don't have to know all the answers.
Yeah.
It's how you surround yourself as well, and how you learn to surround yourselves, and how you choose people that work with you as well. And this is how you grow.
Yep. Couldn't agree more. But in that process, did you ever make mistakes? Did you ever have any failures? Did you ever, you know, fall on your face, as they say, or was everything a pretty smooth transition for you?
You mean the transition from when I came into CGI?
Yeah, to get into your current role as leadership, because I would imagine, like you said, you were out of your comfort zone. There was a lot that you had to learn. What kind of mistakes, if any, were you making along the way? Did you have, was there at
I'm
one
sure.
point where somebody was like, I don't know, maybe, maybe Julie shouldn't be
I,
here?
I'm pretty hard on myself, so sometimes I believe that I've made mistakes, but maybe not as much as people think. But and I see failures or fail like as being more of a learning opportunity.
Yeah.
Maybe one example that come to mind is when I really started at CGI in HR. I had a couple of leaders that some of them were dotted line to me, and some of them were not. Were kind of different organization at that time, and I was trying to have to lead by consensus to make sure that everybody was happy and all good with the plans and so on. And I realized fast enough that that could not work. So I had to learn the tough way. And now it's all about where we're going and why we're going there. And I'll let you find the solution. So there you go.
It's actually interesting because lead by consensus. I remember this used to be, I mean, even a few years ago, there was a big theme around like getting everybody on the same page, getting everybody's buy-in, getting everybody's feedback, getting everybody's consensus. So you find that that consensus is not the most effective way to lead. Can you talk a little bit about why that's the case?
So I believe that we have an approach here that works pretty well, and we call that the shared leadership. Um, and it's not to force people to have consensus, but it's really to explain the why and give them the content and try for them to understand where we're heading, the vision, and so on. Um,
Okay.
it's on being this on the same page, but it's not the same as being as having the consensus. So let me explain. So when we do the strategic planning, we consult three of our our three stakeholders. So our employees, which we call members, clients, and also shareholders. And the goal is to make sure that we get their input to build our plans later. So for the clients, we meet with them. Last year we meet 1,700 of them face to face,
Wow.
content with like uh, an hour and a half conversation on their IT challenges, business trends, industry trends, and so on and so forth. And we gathered that information. We did the same thing for our members. We consulted them to understand if we were doing the job, if they, where do they believe we should be heading, what should be our priorities, our growth, and so on and so forth, and priorities. And last year we had 70,000 of our members that responded to that questionnaire. And also we consult our shareholders to get their input as well. So we gather all the leaders, the VPs and up, once a year in June to share that information and for them to really understand what our clients are saying, what their challenges, where they're heading, and so on. Same thing for members and shareholders. And we set the targets as well in terms of financial. So we don't get bothered and what would be the financial targets, but really about the content. So
Yeah.
then they go back to the organizations, their BUs, their business units across the world, and they build their plan around those three stakeholders. And the goal is really to make sure that when all the plans are set up, we share all of this with all of our members, 90,000 of them, so
Wow.
they feel equipped in going back to their clients with the right content, understanding what the client needs, their challenges, their business and business challenges, but also the industry trends. So when they go back to them, they feel that they have the content and the confidence to have those type of conversation, be more in a consultation mode. Same thing for our members. We share that with all our leaders, that information, so they can build plan around
Okay.
their team. Same thing for the financial aspect and so on. And the goal here is really to make sure that we have the right balance between our three stakeholders. So it's not really consensus, but making sure that we share with them as much information as possible, and for them to act as a unit, not act, but more being a unity of action, and make sure that we balance all the interests of our three stakeholders.
I like that focus on alignment and not consensus because consensus, at some point the buck stop has to stop with somebody. So I think it isn't
Yeah,
like somebody needs to make that tough decision at some point if there isn't consensus. So I like that switching of alignment.
yeah.
So that's kind of an interesting approach. And you mentioned this idea of strategic planning. And a lot of people who listen to this podcast or watch it, whether they're entry level leaders or mid level, planning is a big part of leadership. So when you think about strategic planning, so first of all, what is a strategic plan? And when you're creating one for your company, what are some of the elements that you think about? What are some of the important things to be able to address or put into a strategic plan to make sure that it's, a good one?
So I kind of give you a bit of the process on how we do it, but something that I forgot to mention, it's a really 3-year rolling plan. So we're trying to have kind of a 3-year outlook on our plans, and it is really based on 3 our stakeholders. And we redo that plan, we reconduct that consultations that I talked to you about
Uh-huh.
every single year. So we make sure that we update our vision and our plans. So it's a thorough exercise, but it's worth it. And on a quarterly basis, we all the business unit leaders across the world gather in one room, and they have to share their results by stakeholders, like by member, shareholders, and
Every
also
quarter.
every quarter. So we're all sitting together in a hollow square in a big conference room, and we listen to all of them. They present their results, and it's not for us to judge them, but it's really on how we can learn from one another and help each other if people are struggling in some areas. So it's a quarterly iteration. So we looked at their results against the budget, and we look at their forecast and so on, and readjust every single time that we meet together to make sure that we are focusing on the right priorities
Okay.
and on the right things.
Do you want to learn how to create an amazing corporate culture while avoiding the pitfalls that make for a toxic one? If so, I created a brand new 8-part training video series just for you. In total, it's around 30 minutes in length, and you can get it right now by going to helpmyculture.com. Go there right now before this training series disappears forever. Again, that is helpmyculture.com, and get access to this free 8-part training series on how to create an amazing corporate culture. So obviously, and kind of shifting gears a little bit, I know that you spend a lot of time in the IT space, in the technology space. So I have to ask you, we're seeing a lot of discussion happening now with ChatGPT. There's a lot of conversations around AI and automation. What are your thoughts on what we're seeing in the world of technology now? Is this something that you're worried about? Are your clients asking about it? Any thoughts?
No, I'm not worried at all. This is our business, and our clients are seeing technology as being a great enabler of change.
Yeah.
And we've seen the merge between with business and IT. Every company is becoming an IT company, and obviously technology has helped us making sure that we're focusing on the right thing as well, and not so much on. For example, I remember when I started to work in the at CGI or my previous jobs, there's a lot of things that we don't do anymore by human, but really by technology, which is a really good thing. So we can really focus on the most important thing, or the more strategic things, or what really matters. And for me, it's really the relationships and how we engage with our members, or how we
Yeah.
engage with our clients, and having the right meaningful conversation.
Yeah, it's quite interesting to see. Over the years, there's been so much talk around how technology would replace human beings, and everyone's going to be out of a job. And I even remember it was a couple of years ago, there was a report that came out, and I think it said by, what was it, 2025 or 2030, like 1 billion people would be out of a job or something, and technology would just be taking everything over. I mean, thankfully, we haven't seen that, which has been
No,
good. But
yeah, but how you use your people as well, not you use, but how you reskill and train your people and
yeah,
upskill people as well, in making sure that they continuously grow, and there's so many things that's going to happen, or so many jobs that are going to be created over the next couple of years and 10 years from now and so on. It's also our responsibility to make sure that we have the right people in place and we help them upskill and retrain and so on.
yeah.
So we've been focusing a lot on training them. We've been investing a lot of money since and time as well for the past couple of years. Certainly between when we were during the pandemic. So trained them. We also invested a lot of time in STEM camps, training much younger people to interest them in technology or engineering and so on. So a lot of focus on that front.
What happens when your plans fail? And has that ever happened? Obviously, the whole point of a strategic plan is to ideally be able to make decisions and plan for the future. But sometimes, in the case of the pandemic, whoever saw that coming? So how do you make strategic, or what do you do when a strategic plan fails and doesn't work out?
So obviously not well. Sometimes we make decisions that don't go as planned. So there are learning opportunities, like I said a bit earlier, and it goes back to taking risks, which always includes a possibility of failure. Maybe I can share with you a story which I really like
Yeah.
here and give maybe what you're looking for as an answer. But many years ago in 1992, CGI made one of its first acquisition in
Okay.
the business consulting area. It was a company named Gilman and Hayward, and they were across Canada, about a couple of hundreds people. And a year after the integration of Gilman and Hayward, which were two founders, the only remaining people were Dr. Gilman and Mr. Hayward.
Wow.
So that was a big lessons learned. So at that time, Serge, the founder, and a couple of the executive, and Dr. Gilman sat down and really tried to understand what went wrong. And this is when they created the management foundation framework that we have, which is basically the CGI's memory of all our processes and frameworks that we have, and what worked really well in the past. And it's been evolving through for the past every quarter we evolve it through our best lessons learned. So basically, it's our processes, the policies, how we create relationship with our different three stakeholders, and how we measure success, and so on and so forth. So basically, the management foundation is really our institutional memory and learnings. And like I said, we evolve that on a constant basis. So
Okay.
this is what we use now on a day-to-day basis to serve our client and make sure that we offer quality services to them. But also, it's the tool that we're using in doing mergers and acquisitions when we integrate new people. And we've been using that for the past couple of years with more than 100 acquisitions that we have done, and it's been really helpful for us.
So speaking of mergers and acquisitions, I would imagine that one of the things that are a part of mergers and acquisitions, which is one of the areas that you lead, is a lot of negotiating, a lot of
Patient.
patience, getting the right deal. And it seems to me that a lot of us in our personal lives or even in our business lives, we're negotiating all the time, whether you're negotiating for a promotion, whether you're negotiating for more money, whether you're negotiating, a different job. What have you learned about negotiating and patience through all the mergers and acquisitions that you've been doing? And do you have any particular negotiating stories that come to mind? Maybe techniques that you've used that worked well, or failures where people were just screaming at you and said, this is never going to happen, get out. Like any fun war stories come to mind for you?
Let me think about the story, but I think we use the word most often to have strategic patience. We need to make sure that when we do mergers and acquisitions, that it's at the right time, the right price, the right fit. So sometimes it can take a lot of patience. It can
Yeah.
take years. For example, when we did the integration with Logica, it took us many years to convince
Wow.
that company to finally merge with us. So it's how we engage with them. It's how we're not really keen on hostile takeovers. We don't do that. We want to make sure that, because if we acquire a company, we want to make sure that when we integrate them, because we do integrate 100%, we want to make sure that it's successful. So it's all about the people. We want to make sure that the transition is smooth. So it's how we are we are engaging in a more human way possible with them. But let me think about a story. Maybe it'll come up.
Yeah. And what did you personally learn about negotiating? So, I mean, you're obviously involved with a lot of these deals. And so, if you have advice for people out there who are going through negotiations in their life, and again, not necessarily through mergers and acquisitions, but it could be negotiating a job, a salary. Is there anything that you've learned from your mergers and acquisitions that can be applied to an individual?
I think it always have to be a win-win situation, like to find a common ground for all of the stakeholders and all of the parties. Um, my father always said that the when you started to be angry, you started to lose. So how you content yourself and how you have meaningful conversation, and it's not all about you. It's about the two people
Yeah.
and how it can become a win-win situation.
I like that piece of advice that, when you become angry, you lose. So the emotional regulation piece seems like is an important element for being able to be a successful negotiator.
Yep.
Okay. Getting back to this theme of planning, one of the big challenges I think a lot of leaders are faced with now is how to balance short-term with long-term planning. So
Yep.
you mentioned that you have strategic plans that focus on 3-year sort of rotating plans,
Hmm.
but at the same time, you need to still execute in the day-to-day. How do you balance the longer-term vision or the longer-term success of the company with the short-term stuff that you actually need to be doing?
So, yes, we do have 3-year horizon, but the target that we set for ourselves is it's a 5 to 7 year horizon.
Oh, wow.
Yes. So for each of the goals that we have a set of metrics that we make sure that we set some clear targets that we communicate with all the leadership team at CGI.
Okay.
On a day-to-day basis, remember when I was talking about reaching the best equilibrium among the three stakeholders? We have a set of metrics for each of those stakeholders because
Hmm.
it's easy to be subjective, and we want to make sure that when we have a conversation and making sure that we make the right decisions, we do it as objectively as possible. So this is why we have developed a set of metrics for members, a set of metrics for our clients, and a set of metrics for our shareholders. And this is what we reviewed on a quarterly basis with the leaders across the organization. So this help us really to make sure that we focus on a day-to-day basis.
Okay.
And basically, we have a say at CGI: what gets measured and related result made visible get done.
Yeah.
Uh, so we make sure that we make them visible as much as possible across all the governance of CGI. So it could be at the board, the executive committee, the global ops, which is all the BU leaders gather on a quarterly basis, and the different regions where we have operations. So we make sure that we have that transparency so people understand where we stand, what are the results, and how they can also help on a day-to-day basis to improve the situation and continue to be successful.
Yeah, I think there's a quote. I forgot who it's by. Maybe it was Kelvin. Um, he had a quote on measuring. I think it was something along the lines of what measure gets improved, or you can't
Yeah,
improve what you don't measure, something along those lines. So the
yeah.
data and the analytics piece and sharing and being transparent with those metrics seems like a good idea. And maybe
Oh yeah,
that's something. Oh,
we're really focused on data. And maybe if you don't mind, I would like to add something that when thinking about long term, yes, we have that horizon of 5 to 7 year when we set our targets for each of our goals, but we often ask ourselves, we know a lot of companies have been here for 100 years, so
yeah.
why not a CGI? And we've been asking ourselves how to do this and how to make sure that we ensure the longevity of CGI. So we've been focusing a lot on
Hmm.
our resilience model. What are the attributes that we have? Which one we want to make sure that it stays along the way. The culture, how we keep it intact, and how we make sure that we stay in that. So we're planning for that as well. And we've been consulting our board of directors to understand where they think the world is going as well, to make sure that we are focusing on the right things. Um, So this is something that we're looking at really, really diligently.
How do you, because part of the planning process, and you mentioned part of the board, you guys are always thinking about where the world is going. And this is something a lot of people, a lot of leaders are thinking about. What do you use, or what tools, techniques, resources? I mean, how do you even begin to answer that question? So if there are leaders listening to this and they're leading teams, small or medium or large teams, and they're thinking about that same question, we also want to know where the world is going and what we should be doing. How do we even begin to answer that question of where is the world going? What's that process like?
Um, Part of that process is that when I explained to you the strategic planning process, where we consult our clients, a portion of that consultation is really have them talk on the macro trends, what they see that is shaping the future. Um, Last time we did the exercise last year was really how the supply chains are becoming more resilient, fight against climate change, demographic change, and so on.
Yep.
So we have them talk about all of those macro trends, and we adjust based on their thinking and insights as well. And we do that with our board of directors as much as possible. We do that with external people, firms, and so on. So we want to make sure that we do kind of a 360 rigorous process, but all rooted in conversation. We don't set questionnaires here and there for people to answer, but really a deep conversation with people that we believe that will help us understand where we're going and what's coming ahead.
Yeah, it seems like one of the most important things that you could do is to just talk to people, talk to your employees, talk to your customers. And I think we've gotten so obsessed with doing surveys that we forget the value of just actually having a conversation with somebody, because you're going to learn a lot more from a conversation than you will from somebody, clicking a couple buttons on some sort of a survey. So I like that approach that you guys
And
use.
surveys really miss the nuance that needs to be that is important when we have that conversation.
Yeah, yeah. Well, what are some of the trends that you're paying attention to? So, when you're looking at just the world of work and what we're starting to see, is there anything that really jumps out at you? Is there anything that you're concerned about or worried about? What kind of keeps you thinking?
If you're talking about right now, a couple of things I'm looking at, and as a company, not me personally, but all of us
Yep.
collectively, the talent shortage. Definitely, this is something that we've been focusing a lot of time. Um, Overall, we're happy that we're less impacted than some of other peers or our competitors, but we've been focusing a lot on engagement with people, making sure that, like I mentioned, train them, upskill them, and continuously invest in their career. And because of that, we've seen a higher engagement, a lower voluntary turnover if you compare to our peers. And we believe that what really differentiate us is our ownership mentality, ownership culture. And this comes back with what I mentioned a bit earlier about the share purchase plan, how we give the opportunity for our members to become owner of the company, and also on how we address career opportunities and our culture, how we make sure that it's understood. We have a really decentralized model by metro market and then by industry. And we want to make sure that people are really accountable and empowered, and it's not something that it's centralized from the core headquarters, but they're all unified by one culture. So culture for us is really important. It needs to be lived across all the organization. And the culture is really embedded in the management foundation that we discussed a bit earlier, which is our institutional memory, our culture, and how we do things at CGI. Making sure as well that we're focusing on having the right pipeline, making sure that we have the right expertise. We're focusing as well on D&I, make sure that we have the richness of D&I in building our teams as well. So this is another area of focus that we have. And one close to my heart, obviously, maybe because of my education, but social well-being. In my view, this is a critical one. In the age of hybrid work, talent shortage, leader play an important role in fostering the human connection that support
Yeah.
our company success. So that for me, it's a really important one as well that we're focusing. People can be isolated too easily in this world right now. So we're trying to make sure that we create those connections and build relationship with them.
As far as the talent shortage goes, I mean, this is something that I think a lot of organizations are talking about. So you have experienced this as well. Is it just you have a lot of jobs that are out there that there's just no candidates to fill? Or when you say talent shortage, what specifically do you mean?
Well, generally speaking, we've heard a lot about the talent shortage.
Yeah.
Recruiting, like we've been recruiting a lot for the past couple of years. Uh, the demand in IT has been increasing, as you can imagine. And I believe that last year we hired about 10,000 new members at CGI.
Wow.
Yeah. We don't have the intention to slow down
That's
because
crazy.
of the
10,000 people in a year. That's a lot.
this is why we need to make sure that we found the right people as well. But if
Yeah.
we don't find them, we train them as much as we can.
Okay. All right. That makes sense. My conversation with Julie continues, and you won't want to miss it, where she talks about how to create a culture of ownership and how you can act like an owner yourself, the importance of emotional intelligence, and how to get out of your own way so that you can become successful. This is available on Apple Podcasts, and when you subscribe, you'll get access to a weekly bonus episode, ad-free listening, and early access to new content. It's also a great way for you to support the show so that I can bring in more amazing guests like Julie. I hope you subscribe, and I'll see you next week.